Hi again then guys, and welcome to another installment of Beards and Cars, and chances are this is going to be a fairly long episode compared to usual. I'm going to try to keep it at a steady pace because of the amount of vehicles involved, but a little while back, a few episodes back now, we did some predictions. I made 10 predictions for cars that I thought would come back to GT Sport. 2 of them actually have already. I predicted that the old NSX would come back, which it did, and I predicted that a premium Subaru 22B could come back, which it has. So these prediction videos can sometimes be cool to look back and see how things have turned out that way. Now, of course, the other 8 that I predicted could still come back in one form or another, and some of them I am still featuring on this list, but I wanted to do something much bigger and much more future-looking in scope. And that is, as you saw from the title, my prediction for 40 cars that I think are going to come along potentially and likely in 2019 for GT Sport. I don't think these will be in one pack, but I think that over the course of 2019 in particular, we could well see many of these cars come back in the monthly updates. And if you think about it, over the course of the year, you've got at least 7 cars every month, sometimes 9, so 40 vehicles isn't necessarily that crazy a prediction. So let's get straight into it. First off, a car that I have mentioned before and I'm keeping it in, it's a fan favourite, the Nissan Silvia S13. It was already a premium in GT6, it's a fan favourite, it's a great drifter, I think it's going to come back. It really is as simple as that. We've already got all of the important skylines of the GTR generations at least, so the next obvious one is a Silvia. We've got the 300ZX as well, so of course, why wouldn't you go for the Silvia? Gran Turismo has always had a lot of them, so I think that is coming back. Next up, a car which again I predicted before, I want it to return, and actually my prediction for this car is now stronger because the car which it's based on has come back, the Maserati Gran Turismo, because this car is of course the Alfa Romeo 8C. We already have the 4C in the game. Alfa Romeo has a very strong showing in GT Sport with road cars and race cars, and we have the Maserati back, which of course shares the engine with the Alfa Romeo. I think it's definitely going to come back at some point, and I'm actually really looking forward to seeing it return. Next up, again a car which I did predict before, the Viper ACR, in particular the 2008. I think that there's much more of a likelihood of them adding this SRT10 ACR rather than the newer one. The newer one I think many people would like to see, but the SRT10 is an absolute beast. It's a fantastic track car. It would be one of the best street cars in the game in terms of being OP. I still think it has a very strong chance, especially when you look over the past year and look at how many Vipers they've added. Compare that to other cars. They've actually added quite a few Vipers in comparison to other makes and facelifts of vehicle. In fact, there have been more Vipers added than Mitsubishi Evos, and for a Gran Turismo game, that's kind of interesting and could potentially be a clue for the future. Next up, following on again from the Viper, the Corvette ZR1. In particular though, the C6. A lot of people would probably like the C7, but I think the C6 has a very, very strong chance, just like the Viper, and I would not be at all surprised if they did return, and if they came together in the same pack. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Next up, a very important one for me, my favourite JDM car, never been a premium, I'm still going to predict it, the Honda Integra, in particular though the DC2. Now the DC5 I think has more of a likeliness of coming back because it's newer and there was already a premium, but I'm still going to say the DC2 simply because I want it more and because it's arguably the best front wheel drive car ever built in terms of handling. So I want that one back. I think the DC5 as well, but I'm going to go for the DC2 in particular. Next up, a classic, which I've mentioned before. I think it has a very, very strong chance of returning. The Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing. Again, it was already a premium. It's one of the most iconic Mercedes models of all time. Of course, why wouldn't they bring it back? It would really surprise me, actually, if they didn't bring this one back. Next up, another Mercedes, keeping it on brand. This one is actually moving up my predictions list because of the addition of the BMW E92 M3, and that is the Mercedes C63 AMG. It was already a premium, it was the fastest saloon in the game in GT6. I would not be at all surprised if they brought this badass back, and we'd probably get quite a lot of use out of it as well. Next up, keeping it again in the world of Mercedes. This is my boldest prediction for a Mercedes model because this is the Mercedes I want the most in GT Sport. The SLR McLaren. I adore the SLR. I always have. It's one of my favourite cars, the Roadster especially. I do think that the SLR is going to come back. We had 2 of them in GT6 and one was a premium. It had some crazy visual upgrades. So yeah, I think there's a very, very good chance of the SLR coming back. I think it's more of a question of when rather than if. Next up, I'm going to make kind of a bold prediction, but it's one which I think has some basis in reality. The Bentley Speed 8. Because, for one thing, it's such an iconic car. It's a 2003 Le Mans winner. Bentley overall is such an important brand in motorsport and in Le Mans history. And also it was a premium. It was updated to a premium, and even before that it was featured since Gran Turismo 4. Next up, another car that was a premium, and a car which I strongly believe would be so much better in GT Sport than it was in GT6. The Ferrari 599. A fan favourite, and for good reason. It's a very good car. It's quicker than the Enzo around the Fiorano test track, and it's a great all-rounder. It would make a beautiful rival to a Viper and an SLR. It's got that same kind of body style and same kind of power level. So yeah, I think the 599 has a pretty strong chance, and the reason why I say it would be better now is because in GT6 it just fell into this grey area. It wasn't quick enough to beat stuff like the Enzo, or, you know, Vipers and Corvettes and other supercars in a straight line, but even around a track, it just didn't feel like it really had a place to be. It felt kind of like the Alfa Romeo 8C in that sense. So I think that in GT Sport, it would be a way better car. In N600 to begin with, of course, you could tune it up, you could detune it. So yeah, I think the 599 has a pretty strong chance. Next up, I'm putting another one which I've mentioned a number of times. I think this one has a massive, massive chance of returning. The 69 Camaro. It's iconic, it's been featured for a long time in the series, and there was already a premium version, so it ticks the boxes across the board. I mean, it's a Camaro, how could you not think it was going to come back? Next up, one which has been suggested a couple of times, mainly from you guys, because for me, although it is one that I do agree with, in a similar vein to the Mercedes Gullwing, it's not really a car that I have that much interest in. In fact, I never really used it in GT6, but it was a premium, it was very expensive, and it was a relative newcomer to the franchise. The BMW 507, the classic open-top car. I could definitely see this coming back. Personally, I couldn't care less if it did. I've never been into the car, but I know a lot of people do appreciate it, so sure, I think it probably will come back at some point. Next up, kind of a wild card, but after all, they have brought stuff like the Samba Bus and the Fiat 500 and the Beetle back, so for sure I could see this one happening, mainly for the novelty factor. The Chevy El Camino. Again, it was a premium. It was a hugely popular car online, partially because of the crazy visual mods that you could do to it. I think the El Camino has a pretty good chance. I don't think it's as certain as a Camaro, but I definitely think there's a chance there. And knowing how Kaz and Gran Turismo like to feature these kind of oddball cars sometimes, like the Chaparrals and El Caminos and Samba buses, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all if this one did come back. Next up, a rally icon, plus the brand itself has been brought back, Lancia. The Lancia Stratos. In particular, though, I think there is a significantly higher chance of getting the Stratos road car than the Stratos rally car, for 2 reasons. One, there are barely any actual classic rally cars in the game. There's just the Audi Quattro. Plus, more importantly than that, the road version was already a full premium car with really good quality graphics in GT6, whereas the rally car still wasn't. So I think that the Stratos road car has a very, very strong chance of coming back, especially now that the Delta returned, thus bringing Lancia back into the fray. Next up, one of the hero cars of GT6, one of my favourite cars of all time. In fact, it used to be my favourite car, the Chizeta V16T. It was one of the 15th anniversary vehicles. It's been in since Gran Turismo 4, but it was finally updated to a premium around Gran Turismo 6. In fact, yeah, in GT5 it was still a non-premium. It looks gorgeous, sounds fantastic. I would love to see Chizeta come back, and it would also fit in really nicely with these couple of 90s supercars that we've been having, like the Diablo, the F50, the McLaren, and don't worry, we're going to come back to 90s supercars a couple of times on this list for my predictions. And one of those times is right now, because my next prediction is the Jaguar XJ220. I think there's a good chance, not necessarily a strong chance, but a good chance of finally seeing a premium XJ220 because of what I just mentioned. We've been seeing this inclination towards 90s supercars coming back. In fact, if you think about it, so far GT Sport has featured more additional 90s supercars than pretty much any other era. So I think there's actually a decent enough chance of the XJ220 coming back. Next up, I'm putting a car which has, I would say, like a 50-50 split. It was already a premium. It's a brand that's been in the franchise since GT4, but at the same time, it's not my favourite car of the brand, so I'm not too bothered if this one doesn't come back, but if it meant that the manufacturer returns, that would still be cool. The Cadillac CTS-V Coupe. Now, of course, the Cadillac Cian would make an amazing return, but the CTS-V would be very useful against stuff like the Maseratis, the Astons, around N500, N600. So yeah, I think that there's like a 50-50 chance of Cadillac coming back. Cadillac is one of my favourite brands, so I really would love it if they did, even if it was this one, which isn't my favourite Cadillac. But yeah, I think there's an okay chance of that one. Next up, I'm putting another wild card, kind of, and this one has actually been caused to be on my list by the catalyst of its main rival already being included. The Plymouth XNR gear was added, and now I'm going to predict that the 1959 Cadillac... No, it's not a Cadillac. 1959, I wish 59 Cadillac Eldorado Buretts. The 59 Chevy Corvette Stingray racer concept. The open-top silver one. It was a perfect rival to the Plymouth. I think that they will bring it back at some point. I could see them bringing that back alongside the Stratos and the Gullwing, to be honest. It's that level. Because it's a full premium. It was massively popular. One of the quickest classics in GT6. And again, they've brought the Plymouth back. So that propensity to these old school concept American cars has been proven to be there. They have that inclination. So I think there's a good chance. Next up, I'm going to include kind of a wild card, primarily because of Ryan Maverick on the Discord server. And this is one which he suggested that I think I agree with. The Delta Wing. The Delta Wing, I think, actually has a better chance than you might think of coming back. Now, undoubtedly, it will be in Group X. I have no doubt about that at all, because in Group 1, it doesn't stand a chance, and it definitely doesn't stand a chance in anything else, because it will wipe the floor with everything. It wouldn't be fair. It's the exact opposite problem. So I think Group X is certain for the Delta Wing. I mean, in effect, it is a Group X car in real life, because it never actually won anything. It was in the Le Mans, but it was a Garage 56 vehicle, which means it had the number 0, and even if it won the race, it wouldn't win the race. It doesn't count. It's just an experimental race car. So I think it would definitely be in Group X, but it would still be cool to see it come back and to work with the physics of the game to try and fattle something so unique in terms of its handling. Next up, I'm putting another high roller, one of the last high rollers that we don't have, the Ferrari 250 GT. I've never liked this car that much. I know a lot of people will be disappointed to hear that. It's more of a, more of a supercar in a classic sense, whereas most of the other high rollers are race cars, and I prefer those. But I could definitely see them bringing this one back, probably for around the same price that it was, $7.5 million. I don't really care, to be honest, if this one's brought back, but I could definitely see them doing so, especially given how many high rollers we've seen return so far. Next up, I'm staying in the world of Ferrari for another one which I could not care less about, but many people seem to love, the 365, the Ferrari 365 GTB. We've had the 512 back, we've had a couple of other classic sports cars. So yeah, for sure I could see this one coming back. I genuinely could not care less if this car came back, but sure, why not? I could definitely see it happening. It was already a premium. Yeah. Next up though, the Ferrari which I would love to see brought back. Of course I'd love to see an FF, but primarily this list is predicting returning cars. The FXX. I think that the FXX actually has a much stronger chance now than it did, say, 2 months ago, because in December we had the McLaren P1 GTR, and in November we had the Pagani Zonda R. That's a pretty significant double hit of track day supercars. So it would not surprise me at all if they brought the FXX back. Now, they could skip the FXX and go to the FXXK, which I know a lot of people would love, but to be completely honest with you, I would actually prefer the FXX. I've always liked the FXX more than the K, but maybe that's just me. It was already a premium though, really, really good car as well. Next up, a car which I've talked about a lot in terms of Blue Moon Bay racing, and it would depend if it was in Group X, of course, the light car company Rocket. I could definitely see them bringing this one back. It's just the kind of car that I believe Kaz has a lot of respect for, because he loves racing, he loves stuff like the Ford GT, he clearly has a lot of respect for stuff like the GTR, the McLaren F1. So, designed by Gordon Murray, it's a great little sports car. In effect, it's kind of like the McLaren F1 of the open-wheeled sports car world. It's that much more exclusive and well-engineered than many of the other options like Caterham. So for sure I could see it coming back. It would be a great money earner if it was in the N classes, but we'll have to wait and see, of course. Next up, I'm putting, speaking of McLaren, the McLaren F1 GTR. Again, the McLaren P1 has returned. The McLaren F1 returned early on in the game. We have the McLaren Vision GT, we have the MP4, we have the 650S. So it would not surprise me in the slightest if we get one of the most iconic McLarens ever, the Le Mans winning McLaren F1 GTR short tail. I think there's a significantly higher chance of getting the short tail back than the long tail. Even though I prefer the long tail, I think the short tail, already being a premium, already being so iconic, yeah, I think there's a very good chance of that coming back. Next up, I'm going to say another Pagani. And a couple of months ago, I would not have predicted this because Pagani was nowhere to be seen. But now that the Zonda R has returned, that really opens up a lot of opportunities. Now, they might never add another Pagani, but I think that if they do, the most likely one would be the Huayra. Because the Zondas were gorgeous, but they were never a premium. And I don't think they're going to update them now, to be honest. I know that they tested the Zonda for the sound, but I'm sorry to say I think they just used that sound for the Zonda R. I think that the Huayra, there were already two of them, just like there was with the Veyron. It was already a premium, pretty much the fastest street car in the game in GT6 in a straight line. So yeah, I could definitely see the Huayra coming back. And if you think about it, it would be a very appropriate one to bring back. It would actually give some real supercar or hypercar level rivalry to stuff like the supercars that we already have, like the Aventador, the LaFerrari, etc. Next up, I'm going to say one which a lot of people probably don't care about, and I wouldn't necessarily want it back myself. It's just one which has that vibe. You know, you look at a certain car and you think, yeah, I could see them bringing that back. That's the case here for me. The Alfa Romeo Brera. The Brera never really delivered on what it could do because it was so heavy. You could tune it up to 640 horsepower, which was very cool, and it had all-wheel drive, so it was quick off the line, but it was just never that useful. However, I do think they could definitely bring it back. It was already a premium once again. It had the visual upgrades, surprisingly good performance upgrades. So yeah, I could fully see it coming back. And to be honest, I could kind of see the Brera as having a higher chance than the 8C, even though I wish it was the other way around. But maybe that's just me. Next up, I'm putting a car which, again, changed after a certain update. A K car. The Mazda Autozam AZ1. I know a lot of you guys would love to see this car come back. It's never been one of my favourite K cars. I tend to prefer the hot hatch style K cars like the Daihatsus and the Suzukis, whereas a lot of you prefer the open tops like the Copen, the Cappuccino, the Beat, those kind of ones. And that is why I'm putting this one here now. Because I believe, if I recall correctly, in that one pack, we had the Honda Beat, the Daihatsu Copen, and the Honda S660 all return at once. So, for sure, I think that there's a strong chance of more K cars coming back. And I think that the Autozam would be a hugely popular one, and it could well be one of the best ones as well. Next up, I'm keeping it in the world of K cars again. One that I just referenced, actually, the Cappuccino. We already have Suzuki, but we've only got the Swift. That's not much of a showing. And of course the Escudo would be nice, but I honestly don't think the Escudo's coming back anytime soon, as iconic as it is, which is a shame. But I think the Cappuccino has a pretty good chance. It's one of the most iconic K cars. It's a full premium already in GT6. So yeah, I think there's a very, very good chance of the Cappuccino coming back. In fact, I could see them adding like another trifecta of them, like a Suzuki Cappuccino, a Mazda Autozam AZ1, and maybe one other one. I don't know, a Daihatsu or something perhaps, so I could definitely see that coming back as well. Next up, I'm making kind of a bold prediction, but the prediction is based on one car in particular that we already have in the game, and that is, my prediction is based on the fact that the Peugeot 908 was included in GT Sport from day one, but its biggest natural rival was not included, the Audi R10. By far the most powerful prototype race car in GT6, 1,252 horsepower fully tuned. Now, of course, it wouldn't be that powerful anymore, just like the Peugeot isn't either. But at the same time, of course, why wouldn't we want the Audi R10 back? It would be such a perfect rivalry between that and the Peugeot 908. A far better rivalry than the Peugeot versus the R18. That doesn't make much sense. So I don't know if they will bring it back, but the fact that the Peugeot is included at all makes me think that there could actually be a chance. Plus, once again, there was a premium R10, and let's not forget, they even did a stealth one as well, so they put a lot of effort into that car. Next up, a car which a ton of people want. Again, this one's going higher on my list of predictions because of the E92 M3 coming back. The E60 M5, the V10 engine BMW M5. Some people might prefer the newer ones, like the F10. Personally, I don't care for those. Recently, for me, the M5s have become way too understated, whereas the M5 truly looks like an exotic super saloon, and it doesn't get much more exotic than a 5-litre V10 with a 7-speed and 205 miles per hour. It's basically a 4-door supercar, so for sure I could see them bringing that one back. Once again, you're going to get sick of hearing it, but there was a premium. And there were two versions, just like the SLR. One that was a premium and one that wasn't. So for sure, I could see them bringing the M5 back, and I know a ton of people would be happy with that. Myself included, actually. It's a really good car. Next up, I'm going to make my biggest wildcard prediction probably of the whole list. In fact, there might be one other car, to be honest, which is even more of a bold prediction, but we'll get to that in a second. I want this car. The community wants this car. It would be in Group X, which is annoying, but that's the way it would definitely be. But even so, I want this car back. I want it to be in its full premium glory. I want to be able to make liveries with this thing, and I want to experience it with the physics of GT Sport. The Chaparral 2J, the fan car, the most OP race car in history, in real life, let alone in a game. Why wouldn't you want the Chaparral to come back? Of course it's going to be in Group X, which is unfortunate, but if you think about it, it makes sense. It has to be in Group X. It's so quick that anything apart from Group 1 doesn't stand a chance against it, but then the gearbox is so limiting to its ability that it couldn't really compete against Group 1 cars because many of them are so much more powerful, they're so much newer. The Chaparral is a brutal machine, but I just don't think it's going to be in Group 1. So that's one of my boldest predictions. I really hope that they bring that back. I would certainly love to see it return. Next one is kind of a bold prediction again, but not a super crazy one. It's a car which is very iconic, and as such, I could see them going down like the cute factor to say, let's give the community this iconic movie car, let's update it to a premium. The DeLorean. I think that they could bring back the DeLorean. I personally couldn't care less about the DeLorean, I never have, but a lot of people seem to like it. For obvious reasons, so yeah, for sure. I could see them bringing it back. I don't really have any thoughts on that. I think that they might, but I don't care. I don't care at all about the DeLorean, I never have. The next one is a car that I think has a fairly decent chance, but I'm not sure which one they might bring. The Ferrari F430. Now the only question to me is, will they bring back the standard one, or will they bring back the Scuderia? Now the Scuderia would be the obvious choice, but I could actually see them bringing back the normal one as well. So, I don't know. I would prefer to see an FXX or a 599, but I could see them bringing back a 430, maybe, even though its natural rival of the Gallardo isn't in the game. And to be honest, I don't know if the Gallardo is going to come back. It could. It was a premium. But now that we have the Huracan, I don't know. I just don't know. Next up, I'm putting a car which I'm shocked has not been included already, because the Ford GT is Kaz's favourite car, and this is arguably the most iconic Ford of all time, and when you look at how many other high rollers we have, it is truly shocking that this car hasn't come back yet. It's pretty much the only one that hasn't returned. The GT40. the 1969 Gulf liveried GT40. Now, of course, we have the Mark I GT40 road car, which is the best money-earning vehicle in the game in terms of how easy it is, but we don't have the iconic race car. 20 million, Group X, finally a premium car which has never been before. And I've mentioned this before on the channel, and a lot of people probably won't understand me saying this, but the funny thing about the Gulf GT40 is it's the only car in the whole franchise that I actually don't want to be a premium. I like the graphics looking bad because it reminds me of Gran Turismo 2 and 3 and 4, because the GT40 always looked and sounded so perfect in Gran Turismo that I almost don't want it to look better. I want it to stay nostalgic. But of course, if they did bring it back, it would be a full premium, which would be very cool as well, just in a different way. So yeah, I'm shocked that they haven't already brought this one back. It's pretty much the final one that they should bring back to the 20 million club. Next up, this is the one. This is my single boldest prediction of the entire list, primarily because this is the only car out of the 40 that is not a returning vehicle. It's very difficult to predict cars that are going to be new. I mean, who would have predicted a McLaren P1 GTR? Maybe some people, but most of us wouldn't. We might have predicted the normal P1. So predicting new cars is always a very, very difficult thing. But I'm going to make my bold prediction and say, I believe, given his love for the Ford GT, that yes, Kaz is going to add the 2017 Ford GT. I may be totally wrong, but I think there's a very good chance of that car coming back. Now, what might end up happening, and this also wouldn't surprise me, is Kaz might save that Ford for Gran Turismo 7 and use it as the cover car like the Ford GT was in Gran Turismo 4. But instead of being a black and white game box, it would be like a blue game box like GT6 was. That would not surprise me at all, and that would kind of be cool to have it as the hero car in a very throwback kind of way. But I also think there's a good chance of it coming in GT Sport. So that's my boldest prediction, and I know loads of you would be happy to see that, definitely myself included. It's a very cool car, great rival for the LaFerrari as well. Next up, I'm making two Lexus predictions. Of course, my Lexus predictions haven't always gone that well. I reported on this supposedly leaked image of the Pikes Peak CCSR, excuse me, which of course wasn't one at all, it was the RCF. I just glanced at it, it clearly looked like it to me. I completely forgot that the RCF looked so similar. So of course that wasn't a great prediction, although it wasn't so much a prediction, it was just a misinterpretation of a photo. I think that there are two Lexus models in particular that have a good chance, and of course we saw the SC430 return recently. I think that the ISF could return, but actually I think that the road-going ISF has more of a chance than the Pikes Peak car. And of course, you already know what the other Lexus is that I'm going to say, the one that everyone wants, the LFA. The thing is though, it needs to sound right. It didn't sound bad in GT6, but based on how the Zonda R sounds now and how the 787B sounded when it first came back, I'm kind of worried, to be honest with you, how this would sound. I hope that it would sound good, and this is coming from someone who, I know this will shock many, I'm not a fan of the LFA. I don't dislike it, but you know, I don't have the crazy love for it that many people do. My V10 supercar of choice is the Porsche Carrera GT, not the Lexus LFA. But I totally understand the love. It's a very over-engineered car in all the best ways. So for sure I could see it coming back, and I know loads of you would be happy with that. And my final prediction, in fact actually it's not my final prediction, I've got a couple more. One of my final predictions, this one is kind of falling down my list a little bit. The further that the game goes on without featuring it, the less likely I think it is, but I'm still going to hold out hope. The Mazda RX-8. Because if you think about it, we saw the FD return, we saw the 787B return, we saw the FC return, so it wouldn't surprise me if the premium RX-8 returned, but I don't know. It's not as useful, you could argue, as an RX-7, but I don't know. I certainly hope that it does, but we'll have to wait and see, of course. And my next prediction is one which a lot of people have been screaming since I started this video, the Toyota AE86. It's an icon, it's a fan favourite, it's a great drift car. Personally, I mean, surprise to no one, I couldn't care less about this car, but I know a lot of people do. I get it, I just don't love it. But for sure, I could see them bringing it back. It would be a great little drift rival to stuff like the E30 M3, if they did bring back the Silvia S13, and to be honest with you, if they did bring this one back as a full premium, which it's never been before, I could fully see them bringing back the S13 Silvia and the Toyota AE86 at the same time. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And my final prediction is one which I think has a very good chance: the Mitsubishi Evo 6 Tommy Mäkinen edition. For a couple of reasons. One, the Evo 4 has already come back. 2, the Evo 10 was already included. 3, the Evo 8 has never been a premium, so I don't really see them updating it now. The Evo 9 was never really popular enough to bring it back, but it could. And the Evo 5 kind of falls into the same problem. The Evo 1, 2 and 3, they were never that popular in the community. I personally love them, but I know a lot of people don't. The Evo 6 though, there were multiple versions, a lot of them were premium. The Tommy Mäkinen is an iconic car, it's got the iconic livery. I would not be surprised in the slightest if they brought the Evo 6 back, and it would be a great companion piece to the Evo 4 as well. So that's it. That is my ultimate countdown of my 40 predictions. Some absolute wild cards in there like the Chaparral and the Ford GT, but ultimately I think that loads of these cars have a very strong chance of coming to GT Sport, and I'm going to say even more so, especially in 2019. So of course, stick around on the channel to see if more of these, or to see if any of these come true, of course. And that's it for this pick, so I'd love to hear your predictions down below. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.